So as I said to everyone, welcome to this practice webinar. My name is Joel, and I will be taking you over this webinar today around unconventional ideas for creating revolutionary test teams. I'm actually very excited to be doing this webinar. It's a little bit different webinar that we usually do, mostly because it's really full of practical ideas and know-how and tips and tricks and stuff, and not so much about the theoretical stuff, but things that you can really take on and start doing today or tomorrow if you want, in order to become, again, better testers. But actually, let's get on with the show. And first of all, a little bit about me. Who am I? Wait a second. This should actually work. Cool. So I've been in testing for around 22 years, last time we counted, and I've done a range of very different jobs throughout my life, starting obviously as a tester, but very quickly I became a lead and a QA manager. And I worked in testing in quite a range of different organizations, large, small, enterprise, local, global. And so I really, for the first 3 years, I tried to escape my testing career, and then I realized that I really like testing, and so I sticked around. And right now I blog, I speak usually in different sessions, and within PractiTest, I'm what is called the Chief Solution Architect, meaning that I'm the guy who actually is talking with customers all the time, trying to figure out how to make the best product that we can. And I also manage all of the testing that is run around the system, so that makes me the QA manager. Additional projects that I have running right now is, first of all, the state of testing, which is a pretty cool survey. I'll be talking about it in a second. And the online TestCon, for those of you who have heard about it, it's a pretty cool free online testing conference happening twice a year. The next one is going to be in the spring. And if you want to learn more about it, just let me know. Just a word about the state of testing before we started, and basically because it's actually running right now. The state of testing is a project that I started with Lalit Kumar from Tea Time with Testers about 5 years ago. This is the fifth year that we're running it. It's the largest and longest running worldwide QA survey. And what we're trying to do is basically to understand what is going on in the testing world. We ask people around the world, again, a bunch of different questions that let us understand what's going on, what trends are happening. And then after we review the survey, then we release the state of testing report. And as you can see, we have released already 4 reports. We released the 5th one, hopefully later this year. And it would be great if you can go to qablog.practice.com/state of testing and just fill out that survey for us. Share it with everyone you know that is related to testing, okay? Because again, the more responses we have, the better the survey it is. And so it will be great if you can just help us out. And again, this is one of the projects that I'm running, not directly related to practice. It's mostly, again, it's 100% free, and we use the whole community for that. So if you can, just go ahead and take a look into that. I mentioned practice, so just to plug it in here very quickly. If you are looking for a great QA management system, test management system, then I really recommend PractiTest. Again, I'm obviously biased, but all of our customers really say how great the system is. It's very simple and intuitive. It's also very professional and flexible to work with. Integrates with, I think, everything that you might be working with, from bug tracking systems to testing systems, Selenium, Jenkins, whatever you're working with. And we do have one of the best darn supports in the business, and you're welcome to try it out. We're always trying to help in that. Okay, so we have a 2-week free evaluation license of PractiTest. Just go over to the site and you'll be able to work with it. And I promise this is the last that I'm going to plug about PractiTest, maybe a little bit about the state of testing a little bit later on. So let's actually get on with what we want to talk about. And the last thing that I want to say is that I'm going to be talking quite a lot about different tips and tricks and very specific stuff. Not sure that I will be able to answer questions during the session, but if you have any questions, you have the chat as part of the GoToMeeting, the Zoom, go ahead and use it. I'm going to be reviewing the chat after the session, and again, towards the end, and hopefully we'll have about 5 minutes for Q&A towards the end. So first of all, we have been talking about, again, creating a testing revolution within your teams, within your practices. And I choose the word revolution very carefully. And the first question might be, okay, so what's a revolution? And why do we want to cause one? Basically, a revolution, if we want to start by defining it, What's not a revolution is going to be an evolution. A revolution is not something that, as an evolution, is happening slowly and surely based on stuff that is naturally flowing within the flow of things. Is not standing together. An evolution is a very, very big change. First of all, revolution comes from Latin. It means turn around. Revolver, if you're a Latin speaker like I am. So it basically means that you're doing something different. You're turning around. It needs to be not a slight change, but a fundamental and drastic change to whatever is happening right now. It also needs to take place on a quote-unquote relatively short time. If you're going to be taking, again, quite a lot of time, no, it's actually something that boils and breaks out and makes that change relatively quickly. And again, it's something that goes against the current understanding or the conventions of what has been taking place in the world, or at least in your ecosystem at that time. And I was looking for examples of how a revolution looks like, and I think that this is one of the best examples of how a revolution actually looks like. The revolution usually starts by an individual, someone understanding that the way that the fish are swimming right now, it might not be the best way. And this individual, or very small group of individuals, actually is going to make a stand, and it's going to change the way, and it will start facing the other direction. And at the beginning, that person causing that revolt might look that he's going to be swimming away from all of his friends. He's going to be swimming the other way around, getting far from people. But if the revolution is right, and if these fish actually understood something that the other fish didn't catch, that will make life better, quickly enough, this fish will become the leader of the pack. Instead of being the half, everyone will actually start following him or her or them on this path of the new revolution. To make it a little bit more tangible and to give a little bit of some examples, let's talk about revolutions, not necessarily around testing, but that have been happening for the last thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And the first revolution that I think everyone can agree upon, it's the invention of tools in order to help us. And again, we were on the prehistoric ages, we were basically hunters-gatherers, and we were basically hunting with our hands. And when we started creating tools, spheres, using, again, very simple stones, then this became a revolution. The people who had the stones had the advantage, and the people who had the advantage became basically the leaders and the rulers of everything there. And so this very simple, very primitive revolution might be the first revolution that we actually are able to remember. Another revolution that I personally like was the invention of gunpowder. There's a dispute whether it was in China or I think it's Egypt. But again, it was discovered and it was used for pyrotechnics, then for war, obviously. And it became a very, very big revolution. Whoever had the use of this powdery effect actually was able to win those wars. Another revolution came, for example, from the Watt engine. Okay, when we started to create an engine that was able to use other forces in this thing, it was actually steam in order to generate power. So this changed the face of the world drastically. We can look at intellectual revolutions. Well, it's a very distinct way, because this revolution actually is when we defined evolution or animal evolution. And this is when Darwin actually came up with the origin of the species and his chronicles about how actually, instead of the creationist theories, he talked about the evolutionist theories, and it changed the world, the way that the world actually looked at science at that point. Another revolution, Einstein with the theory of relativity. We can obviously see the World Wide Web as a revolution. And we can even look into the way that Steve Jobs, against what everyone thought about, came up with the iPhone, and he basically changed our lives and the lives of almost everyone on the planet with his idea of a smartphone, that everyone would actually have one of them. So if you look at it, these are all examples of revolutions where someone actually takes something and changes the face of the world drastically based on that idea that he or she had. Now, obviously, these are revolutions in the world, but the question is, can we have revolutions in testing? And I believe that not only can we have them, we have had them in the past. Might not be as big as Darwin or not as effective as the iPhone, but we have certainly have revolutions in the world of testing, at least that I can think of with my very limited experience. So if I try to think about a number of global revolutions in the world of testing, I can think about the first one when people started having independent testers in projects. And remember, at the beginning, again, even software development was very limited, and no one thought about having testers. And then all of a sudden, people understood the need of having a testing function. And so we created testers in projects. Another big revolution for me is when we started talking about risk-based test management. It was not only testing as a go ahead and test it, it was testing as a science mostly, where we started analyzing the product, defining risks and saying, okay, so this is what we're going to be testing and this is why. And so we created a whole new language and a whole new approach basically for the testing world. Another very, sorry for the words, cool revolution that I was very happy to live in and still live within is the exploratory, the session-based testing revolution, where, again, Ken Canner, James Bach, back in the day started saying, hey, it's not only that the informal testing is something everyone should do, and everyone does already, but there's a methodology around it, and we can implement it, and using these methodologies, it's not an excuse, it's not something we need to be ashamed about, but it's actually a practice that we could all be testing upon. And some people might look into the agile testing / modern testing, all the new type of testing going on as kind of a revolution where we're basically shifting and expanding all the roles and the relationships of the tester with the rest of the world that we're working on. So all of these might be examples of testing revolutions. So we need to think about that kind of thing whenever we're trying to say, hey, we're living in a world that is currently changing, and we can be part of that change and not only, again, live within the boundaries where we are. So obviously a local revolution will be smaller than whatever we have thought about up to now, but still it's very important. And as a person who has actually gone over a couple of those in my career, I think that they are very useful and they're very invigorating, and they really help us as testers to become more professional, to provide more value. And what I'm going to be doing today in this session is actually going to be sharing with you a lot of these ideas for revolutions that I have seen in myself, I've seen other organizations that I've worked with, and try to provide them to you so that you can actually take it upon yourselves. Before we start talking about the actual tips, about the actual ideas, there are some things that you need to take into account if and when you're going to be starting your own local revolution. And again, these are some tips out of my experience. Feel free to take them or not, however you want. But the first one is not to wait for a perfect idea, quote unquote perfect idea. And again, that is when we're basically saying, hey, I might want to try this, but I'm not sure that it's going to succeed. I'm not sure that it's perfect. I don't have all my bases covered. It might fail. Hey guys, don't work for a perfect idea because you're simply not going to have it. Okay? It's better actually to start with something and then progress with it. And I will talk a little bit more about it later on. Remember, it's a revolution, so you will definitely not get agreement from everyone. Not everyone's going to see the logic and the spark of genius and madness from that idea that you have. You're going to have quite a lot of people who are going to try to stop you, and you need to find only a little bit of people who will be able to go along with you. But remember, you won't get agreement from everyone. That's why it's a revolution. Whenever you start talking with people who are against it, remember to make everything about the idea and not about the people. Especially if you're working in large organizations or even places where the testing function doesn't have all the respect that it should have at this point. Talk about the idea, don't talk about the people. Don't talk either about the people who are bringing the idea forward, that being you and your pals, or the people who are against that idea. Make sure that you always focus on whatever you want to change and not who was actually fighting in for or against it, because it will make it personal. It will just sink your revolution before it starts. Oops, sorry. Start focused and stay strong. Don't try to do too much stuff. Remember, it's going to be about succeeding or failing fast, and I will talk about failing fast. And you will need to stay strong, especially as people, the skeptics around you, are going to be telling you how much you're not on the right path, how much you're wasting your time, you're wasting everyone's time, you're endangering something. So remember to start very, very focused on what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it, and also stay very strong on it. And as I was saying, fail fast and be ready to move forward. Obviously, not every idea will be a good one. Even good ideas won't match every single organization. So try stuff, be able to try it very, very hard, very, very fast. And once you're ready to accept that this is not a great idea for you, then move forward to something else and to do additional stuff. It's not about succeeding in the first row. It's about succeeding in the long row. Okay? So again, don't fall in love with your ideas. Don't fall in love with those initiatives that you have, but be able to try them very, very strongly and be able to move forward very, very quickly. These are only a couple of tips. I might have some additional tips later on, but let's actually start talking about the ideas. And what I was actually talking with a couple of colleagues and again, reviewing stuff and trying to gather things. And we came up with 17 different ideas to choose from. We didn't plan for that number. It's the number that came out. And when I looked at the ideas, I was able to group them together into ideas for a single tester, being that a single tester in a team or a single tester within a team of additional testers. Ideas that are actually suited for testing teams and ideas for test managers. And obviously, these are incremental. If you're part of a team, that you might use the single ideas and the ideas for testing teams. And if you're a manager within a team, that you may actually use all of them. And you can also, again, try to use different mixes of them. Remember, this is only from my experience, but these are pretty cool things that I have seen working very, very well. So let's get started with the ideas, and we're going to get started with the ideas for single testers. And when I mean single testers, I really mean all the spectrum of a single tester. It might be the one-man show working on a startup, or even with an isolated Agile team where the testers should be doing everything, or at least being in charge of all the testing stuff. You might be a tester within a team of testers, again, working any type of approach, but you're one among a group of people who are in charge or responsible for the testing organization. Or you might be a single tester within a very large group of testers. Okay, regardless, we're talking here on the spectrum on the stuff that you can do as a single person within a team or alone in order to improve the testing that you're going to be doing. So let's start actually talking about the ADMs themselves. The first idea that I want to bring forward is going to be the idea of using production metrics for your testing scenarios. It might sound simple, or it might sound very complex, but it's actually very straightforward. What I think you need to do is actually to take a look into data that you're gathering in your production. It might be if you're working on a SaaS system, all the data that is coming from production. If you're even working on an on-premise system, if you get logs or stuff like that, try to understand what's going on outside. And use these production metrics in order to come up with different things. You can actually come up with new test cases, okay? Looking into stuff that is happening outside, you can think about new scenarios, you can think about tests that you haven't thought about before. If you already have quite a bunch of tests and all the time we need to prioritize them, then look for these testing metrics, these production metrics, in order to help you prioritize excuse me, the test cases that you already have. Now, the first question that people are going to ask, okay, so where do I look for these production metrics? And again, if you're working on a SaaS, on a hosted system, it will be trivial. Start by looking into your production logs. Within your production logs, talk to your team and go over those exceptions within the logs. Exceptions are usually the stuff that is happening that you should be catching before. So look into those exceptions. Why are they happening, and how can you actually use this information to generate better ideas of what to test next time around? You can use analytics and metrics, anything that you can get from your site, or again, information of what type of functionality is being looked for. If you don't have any of those, even go to your support and try to look at the logs of the information, things that people are asking within your customer base. Look for any type of data, raw data that is coming out of your production environment, and use it for your sake. Use it in order to come up with test cases, to prioritize them, for ideas, in order to focus where everyone's going to be working. Now, I'm not going to be stopping every single one of the ideas because we have quite a lot of them. So let's actually move forward. The second idea is to always mix your testing approaches, okay? And here I want us to look or to think about let's say a craftsman. Let's say a craftsman that makes furniture. That craftsman that makes furniture, he's going to be using hammers, chisels, screwdrivers, all kinds of different tools in order to generate his table, his chair, whatever he's going to be doing. This is the same thing that we need to do as testers. We need to always, but always mix the different testing approaches, the different testing techniques that we have in order to make the best work that we can do. And this is problematic. Why? Because as I've seen time and time again, once you are a tester, when you start working and you're very good on one approach, then you take to make it your only approach. So if you're very good at writing test scripts and running them, that you're going to be doing that all the time. If you're excellent at exploratory testing, then you're only going to be doing exploratory testing, not scripted testing. Same goes for techniques. If you realize that you like pair testing, you might not be doing any of the additional type of testings, and so on and so forth. So the first thing that you need to do is to start by learning the different approaches, to learn the different techniques. You need to make sure that, again, you're not going to be using a spoon to eat all your food. Sometimes you will need a fork, sometimes a knife. So start by understanding what other approaches do you have in there. A very nice thing that I've seen in a number of organizations is to make it a rule, sometimes a habit, sometimes even a very strict rule, that you cannot use only one approach in order to test something. You need to demonstrate whenever you're testing any part of your product that you use 2, 3, 4 approaches. Usually it's only 2, but you need to show that you use more than one. And the idea is that most time these approaches are complementary. Okay, what you can do in exploratory testing usually is not the same with scripted. If you're working with pair testing, you're going to find different type of issues. So always make it a rule. One of the biggest things, impairments that we see whenever people want to use different types of testing is that they don't have the resources handy. So for example, I like using heuristics when I'm working with my exploratory tests. So if I want to be able to run exploratory tests all the time, I should have a printout or pages or somewhere where I have my heuristics in hand. If you're going to be working with scripted tests, then you need to have those scripts ready. Or again, checklist or anything else that you want. Make sure to have those resources handy so that you can actually use them, because if not, you'll have a pretty good excuse why you're not using that mix. Now, another thing that is very useful is to continue looking for new approaches. Now, even an old guy like myself, I'm always learning about new approaches, new ideas. And the way to do that is by listening to, again, webinars, reading blogs, forums, going to conventions, and again, trying to go conferences and trying to keep your ears open and your eyes open. Remember, there's no such thing as the inability to learn new tricks. Guys, we're not dogs, and we can continue learning new tricks until the day we retire or even after that. So as long as you have an open mind, you will be able to always get new approaches and to learn new things that will help your testing. Another idea that you need to take into account is the idea of using scripts for your testing. Okay, there has been a very big discussion around, should we call it automation testing or scripting or whatever? Is our automation testing running our test cases or helping them run our test cases or checking? I don't even want to get into that kind of worms. Basically, you need to understand that you have ways of assisting your testing, and this is what you need to do, okay? Now, what do I mean by assisting your testing? We always need stuff to be done by us or for us. It might be, again, deploying things in our environments. It might be parsing through a log file in order to look, again, for those ideas that we're looking for, those exceptions. It might be creating data or bringing up environments. All of that can be assisted by knowing a scripting language and by using that scripting language for our assistance. A case that I remember all the time, back in the day, I used to work for a very large organization, and we had quite a lot of licenses of WinRunner and QTP. So what we used to do, we used to run QTP scripts and WinRunner scripts doing very simple stuff on the project, on the system we were testing, and then we would start running our test case in parallel. And that would actually bring us all sorts of scenarios that were generating more and more scenarios like human behavior, where we were working in parallel to other people, to other processes running in parallel. Okay, so these are kind of assistance that you can get using, again, only an example of stuff that you can do. So it's not only about running scripts in order to do stuff, it's running scripts in order to help you get stuff done better. Okay, and I like someone who actually said that he doesn't do test automation, but he uses quite a lot of automation in order to assist his testing. Okay, so I really, really recommend it. Now, an additional idea, and again, this might be useful for people who are working on hosted environments or SaaS environments, but it can be also for people who are working on-premises system, is to push for instrumentation. Now, what's instrumentation? Instrumentation is the ability to monitor and measure the level of a product's performance and to diagnose all the errors and to write trace information that will help us to diagnose and to understand those errors. Okay, so basically that means that you're creating that code, that product, in a way that if something fails, not only will you know about it, but you will know why it happened. You will be able to give a grade, measure how the product is performing. Okay, problem with instrumentation, it's something that you need to push during planning or at least during development. You cannot, it's very hard to add instrumentation at the end. Okay, you need to add instrumentation where you're running the test, when you're creating those features. Okay, so it's going to be very, very useful for you to push on that. It will help you to get that data once your system is running in production, but you will need to involve other teams and get their inputs as well. Okay, so you need to basically convince development and convince product management and convince your DevOps team that you need to have it there. The good part is that once you explain what you're looking for, most people will just nod their heads and says, yes, you're absolutely right. Let's actually start to do it. Now, instrumentation is especially useful when you do not have a lot of time to do testing pre-production, and you will end up releasing products that will have limited testing, and you will want to make sure that you did not slip any big bugs into production without actually knowing it. So if you're working DevOps especially, if you're working Agile and hosted environments, this is going to be a very, very good use and a very common use. And if we try to look into testing as quality assurance in the broader meaning of the word, then this is one of the things that you need to do in order to ensure quality, not only before you release it, but after you have released your product. A pretty cool idea that I also gathered from a friend of mine, I have been using it lately, and it's actually a very, very, very good one. It's actually called the use of premortems for important features. Now, most of us know what a postmortem is. That means that if something went wrong, let's actually understand what went wrong so that we can do it better the next time. A premortem is basically an activity where you go over, let's say you have a very, very big feature that you're going to be releasing. Now, someone needs to play the devil's advocate and imagine that something went very, very wrong. Now, let's try to imagine what could have caused this. Okay, it's a very good way of thinking about the possible and plausible bugs before they happen and making sure that our product not only was tested for that, but that we made sure not to release this before. It may sound a little bit silly. It may sound a little bit childish, but it's incredible to use it and to do it. And I really challenge you to try and do it in one of your features, one of your common features, and ask the people, again, do a very quick brainstorming session. Let's say, okay, you're going to be releasing a new product that helps you to upgrade the system. What could go wrong? Try to think a couple of causes. Try to look into what might cause that, and you will start seeing people who start taking notes and saying, yeah, I want to make sure not to make that mistake myself. And that's when you will understand that you have done something. And when people start asking for that up front, it will be even better and even more important than that. Now, again, you won't be able to do it alone. This is an exercise that you need to do with your developers, with your DevOps architects, other people. It might be a good idea, again, once you actually have it, to set up your dashboards and to set up your monitors for that. And again, remember that it's something that you want to be using mostly for your new features or for your very important features. It's not something to be done on the minor stuff. It might take too much time and not be as valuable for those occasions. Now, an idea that if you're able to do it, it will be extremely valuable. It's going to be the idea of going actually to visit your customers upfront and to learn from them. I have done this with my teams for the last, I don't know, 15, 17 years. And it has been incredible. Okay. The idea is to go to your users, to your actual users. If you're working on enterprise systems, to go to those organizations. If you're working with end users, then go and see them use the product and actually come to them and see how they're working. Try to come up with some questions in order to validate some assumptions, validate some of your behaviors or those that you want to see. You will be able to gain firsthand knowledge of what people are doing, that real usage that people are doing within the system. It will help you to become a real customer advocate within the team. Whenever you start working on features next time, it won't be you coming up with an idea of how people might work or might not work. You will come with real people, real users, says, hey, remember that guy from, I don't know, that bank or other digital customer, this is the way they're working, this is what I know from when I was there. You will really become that advocate within your team. Once you have been at someone's place, then it basically opens a channel. If you want to validate a customer question, if you want to ask them, hey, I have a theoretical quote unquote question, how do you do this or that, or how would you appreciate this or that, it will really help you also, even to get, again, data or any other kind of things from customers. It will be very, very valuable. Okay. The upside of this is that in my experience, and again, I have been doing this for a long, long, long time, customers enjoy and gain from these visits as much or even more than we as a developing team or testers do. They love it. They like to see how we work. They like to see what we know. They like to listen what we're working on. And they feel really, really valuable once they're part of that system. Remember, these guys are using your software, so they want to make sure that it's good, no more, sometimes even more than you want it to be good. Now, if you cannot go and visit customers, then you have an alternative, and that is to work on your support and professional services task within your company. Again, guys, remember, we are the guys who know the system the best. If you're testing the system, then obviously you know it better than anyone else. So you can use this knowledge in order to gain customer access and knowledge. Again, might be indirect, might be direct. If you're working with support, then you can answer questions, understand how people are working. If you're using professional services, again, it will be a way of visiting customers. And again, I have done both of these approaches. I do support right now, and obviously professional services again within PractiTest. But I also make sure that everyone in my team does it, because it really helps us to understand people better. As I mentioned, we know the features best, so we can use this knowledge in order to help the company. The first thing that people will tell you, especially in the professional services team, is, hey, you do not know how to communicate with customers, how to behave with customers. You know what? Tell them to try you. You can go with them at the beginning. Only once they feel comfortable, then you can start doing stuff by yourself. You can do it remotely. You can do it monitored. Put yourself at their disposal. And again, let's hope that they will know how to use you best. Now, as I mentioned, when you're pairing with support, it will help you to give feedback on the bugs and issues, to understand how people are working with the system and get that feedback in order to make a better system. If you're working with professional services, it will help you to understand how people are using the system better. Another pretty cool idea, this one I have been doing lately, but I've seen it done quite a lot of time, is basically do pair programming with your developers. Now, the first thing that usually testers will tell you is that, how can I do a pair programming session if I do not know how to program, if I'm not a coder? And the answer is simple. Guys, programming is not rocket science. From my experience, and I learned coding very late in my life, 3/4 of it, if not more, is plain logic. And the rest is stuff that, again, you're not writing the code. You're basically sitting with your developers and brainstorming and doing it as they are doing it, and you will be quite a lot of help. It will give you the ability of being a soundboard, of helping people as they're writing the code. You will see how, simply by doing it together, you will be able to help them fight all sorts of issues, all sorts of mistakes, design issues, logical bugs in there. Maybe people do not think upfront of all the scenarios, and you will be basically doing some bug fishing before the program is even written. It's a great opportunity, and it will get you closer to your developers in the team. Okay, it will help you to again establish those relationships and nurture them better. The last idea for single testers or testers working in a single team is the idea of introducing your whole company into testing. And for that, I was actually part of a couple of WhatsApp groups. One of them was talking about bug hunts earlier today. It's the idea of doing mob testing and bug hunts and contests. And again, all of them might be a complete webinar, so I'm not going to go over any of them. You can just Google them and understand how they work. But basically, with each one of them, you will be able to get the help that you need as a single tester, especially if you're the single tester in your team. You will get other people to do testing with you. It's not for all types of testing. As I mentioned, maybe the first one is or the second idea, it's another kind of blend that you can add into your testing. It will help people to enroll into testing using quote unquote funnier or better activities like mob testing. It might be quite fun if you know how to handle it, or bug hunts can be half a day of a very good vibe within the teams. So it will help more people to be enrolled in your testing. Try to understand what type of ideas will be better for your team. If a bug hunt might work better or a bug finding contest might work better, again, try to look into all sorts of constraints, whether you're sitting on the same geographical place, if people feel comfortable working with one another, if they like parties or they like working. All that kind of different approaches and constraints will let you choose which one works better. And if you have questions about which one to choose, contact me directly later on, and I will help you to understand which one might be better for you. And a very cool additional thing that happens once you do this is that once you give developers and other people in the team a taste of testing, it will be easier for you to coach them into doing more testing later on. People try to think that testing, it's either boring or they don't know how to test. Once you show them that they do know how to test and they can find bugs just as you can, it will be easier for you to coach them and to get, again, additional testing resources if you need them, when you need them, as part of your day-to-day work. So these were, again, in a nutshell, the ideas for individual teams, for individual testers. And what I want to do right now is start talking about ideas for testing teams and how can you make a revolution within your testing team. And again, remember, a team might be a small team within an organization. You don't need to be a huge team. On the other hand, it might be a huge team. Again, you might be working on an enterprise company where you have hundreds of testers and you're part of a team of 10 testers within an organization of 150 testers. Doesn't really matter. These ideas actually suit all of you if you want. The first idea is basically to have an agile approach for your internal team of all the tasks on your projects of your internal team. And one of the very sad things that I see all the time around testing is that we might have quite a lot of ideas of improvements and projects that we want to run internally in testing, and they always get pushed and we never get around to doing them. And that is because we do not know how to manage them. And once I started looking into how Agile actually can be used in all sorts of personal activities, it rained on me that it's very good if we could use it also for team projects. You don't need to work only on quote unquote one Agile team. Let's say you work within your project Agile team, but you're also part of a larger testing team within the organization. You might also have other tasks and other projects that you can actually run in parallel. The good thing is that, or the idea here is basically to go ahead and create a backlog and a Kanban board or any other way of how you manage your projects and tasks and manage these additional projects in parallel. You might want to get time for them. You might not be able to get time for them, but that doesn't mean that you cannot prioritize a backlog and also have a Kanban board for that. A very cool way of doing these ideas and actually advancing them is to take an iterative approach for them. Again, you don't need to get all the idea done all the time. Try to think of iterations. Try to think about user stories. So if you want to implement an automation framework, break it down into user stories. Assign it to people. Make sure that everyone can do it and iterate on it. You don't need to do the whole framework up front. You can do it little by little. Or if you want to, again, start learn exploratory testing or work in deployment environment, all of that you can actually do as projects. It's also a very good way of making it a team effort. If you're able to organize it as a Kanban board for your testing team as part of all the rest of the teams, it can help you also to leverage all of your team effort. And it's also very important to use those rituals and processes, okay? They are not there in Agile only because they're fun. The idea of having meetings either daily or weekly, or carrying on dashboards and doing retrospectives, all of that is important. So if you're going to be managing your ideas using an agile approach for your team, have those retrospectives, have those weeklies, have those dashboards in parallel to those of the rest of the organizations. Sometimes after you have done it enough, then you can include it in your global backlog and you will get legitimacy for that. But even if you hadn't, that doesn't mean that you cannot use these approaches also to run your own internal ideas within your testing team. Another great idea, and again, I've seen this work and I really recommend it, is to set up a tester mentoring program. This is usually for organizations that it's a little bit bigger. It won't work if you have 3 testers. It might, but it's usually more when you have 7, 10, 12 testers and more. Mentoring basically means that you will pair a junior tester with a senior tester, and that senior tester will mentor that junior tester on how to grow into the testing profession. And when I look in retrospect, I really, really wish I had a mentor when I started doing testing. First of all, because it would have been better, I would have felt better, and I think it might have saved me quite a lot of headaches and heartaches during my initial testing. Now, the value is both for the junior testers and the senior testers. The junior testers obviously get all the knowledge, but there's quite a lot that you get whenever you are a mentor as part of the process. Having been a mentor and being a mentor myself, you get quite a lot. It might be on an ego trip, or it might be, again, something else that we get, but it's actually something pretty good for the seniors. Now, if you have multiple testing teams, this is a great opportunity to actually have multiple teams working together. So if possible, try to have mentorships across different teams. It gives a little bit more perspective. It's very important for starting mentors to get guidance, okay? So you can get mentoring guidance for mentors, read about it on the internet. There's quite a lot of stuff on what methodologies should you use, how to talk to those trainees. Everything that is in there, remember, your mentors will need guidance, obviously, at the beginning. It's not only to say, hey, you're a mentor, you're a mentee, go ahead and do it. It's better to provide mentors your guidance. And also make it a legitimate effort. Do not say, hey, I'm going to pair you guys. Go ahead and try to do it after hours. Everyone can spare 45 minutes to an hour once every week, once every 2 weeks. So give it legitimacy by making it an in hours and not an after hours activity. Another very, very cool idea, not every organization can do it, but if you can, that would be a great thing to do, is to organize an internal QA conference. Doesn't need to be a large conference. It can be a half a day or a day conference. The idea is having different people from your organization give out internal chats and talks about something specific they're doing, something specific they're learning. One of the things that I've learned is that working for a conference is incredible. The amount of effort and the amount of knowledge that you get from researching a topic, from putting together a presentation, it's great. It also helps to organize your ideas and to, again, provide better value. So if you can do it internally within your teams, that's incredible. You will need to provide guidance and funding. Again, if you can do it offsite, do it offsite. If you can let people work on their presentations, do it. If you can make it an event, it's even better. Again, all the bells and whistles that go with it, it makes it even easier for people to feel that it's something special. Try to give prizes. Again, if you have multiple people providing presentations, choose the best one. Give prizes. Try to involve your higher management. And the type of prizes you can get is, for example, conference passes. I remember one of the first internal QA conference that I attended, the people who actually made the best presentation got a free pass to Star East. Okay, and that was about 15 years ago. It was very, very cool to see the people going to Star East, not even to talk, but only to attend because they made the best presentation. Okay, vacation packages, iPads, anything that you can think of, but make people be proud of working on that conference, bringing forward that idea. And again, afterwards, people will take those ideas that we talked about and will deploy them internally, just as we do after regular conferences that we attend. An amazing idea that I heard on a conference that I attended, and it took me a while to understand what they meant on it. It's actually what it's called a guild system. Guild basically means that you might have, let's say that you have different agile teams, okay? And each one is working on their own processes. It might be together, it might be not. But then what you do is you can make cross teams groups. These are informal groups that are going to be talking and developing a specific content or a specific topic, okay? It might be, for example, a cross-team guild that is working on docking machines and how to do deployment on Dockers. And it can be a cross-team guild that is talking about usability on the product, or a cross-team guild that is going to be talking about localization on your product. The idea is to start within your test team, say, hey guys, let the people actually come up with those ideas. I want to research more the topic of internationalization and localization of the product. I know that other teams might be working on that, so I want us to start meeting once a week, once every 2 weeks, talk about it. Start with the testing team, give them that space, that room, that budget in order to start working on those ideas. Don't close it to testing teams. Very, very quickly, you will start seeing other people within the organization who want to come and work on that. Let them self-organize, but make them also give out deliverables. It shouldn't be a philosophical review. It should be something that is going to be giving out good results. And once you have those results, make sure to make a noise about it. Don't keep them quiet. If you have wins within your organization, within your guilds, make sure that everyone knows about them, because it will give you more strength to create more guilds and to get even more legitimacy for this. And I think that I heard about it first from Spotify. I thought it was a great idea. It took me a while to get it rolling, but I think it's a very, very good way of actually going deep into a specific topic that is across your teams without needing to push forward a specific agenda on that. Now, the last part, because we're reaching towards the end, and again, if people have questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but the last ideas are ideas for testing leads and test managers. And again, these are the guys who sit all the day and do nothing, or well, that's at least what many people think, but we all know that as test leads, we do need to work quite a lot. And so there are some ideas that you're the person in charge of the testing organization. It might help you to, again, generate another revolution internally within your team. By the way, I'm not sure if you all noticed this. I'll give you 2 seconds to try to understand what you're looking here. For those of you who didn't caught it, what you're looking is actually a map of the world upside down. And here you have Australia, and here you have North America, and here you have Africa, and Europe and Asia over here. And this only comes to show that sometimes we need a little bit of perspective in order to see the world a little bit different. And so I want you to have some perspective. And one of the things that I've done in a number of projects, and it had great results, especially once we have been doing this project quite a lot, is actually to say, hey, you know what? Usually we try to learn the product, come up with a testing strategy, and then create, even after the fact, dashboards in order to show the information for everyone. And I'm telling you, you know what? No, do it the other way around. Try, first of all, to remember that you are testing in order to provide someone information. What is the information they need? So start from the end. Start going and say, hey, you know what? This is the type of information that I need to provide. So I'm going to come up with those dashboards, with those timelines of when should people be needing that information. Then you define the information, and only afterwards you plan on what data do you have and what data will you need for that. And then very quickly you start realizing that there are some things that do not really provide value. So you either do not do them or you push them for last. And so you're focusing very much on the specific stuff that will give value to your team. So that's a good exercise. And I call it start from the dashboard. And I really encourage, if you are in charge of your next testing project, try to look at it this way. I'm sure that it will give you some fun results. Another thing that I think that people have been talking quite a lot is if you're working on a team that has DevOps, and again, it might not be for everyone in the team, remember to expand your testing into production. This is kind of that basic shift right, but it's still something we need to do. Remember that if you're working with DevOps or if you're working in production, the testing does not stop once you release the product. Actually, for some people, it starts there. So start planning what parts of your testing you will run once you are deploying and how you're going to be monitoring that. And again, we go back into instrumentation and we go back into monitoring. Everything is interrelated. Try to think a little bit about more complex deployment testing processes. You can do stage deployments, birdcage test cases, all sorts of things that will give you more authority and more practice and more power into those testings that are being done after you release the product, while you're deploying the product, and while you're operating the product. All of that monitoring, it's something that I believe should be very much on the hands of the testing team, of the quality team, because we're basically doing testing and monitoring on deployment, and we should own that stuff as much as we can. Another good idea, an important idea for test managers and test leads, is basically to become the testing coach for your non-tester teammates. More and more, we're getting people doing testing who are not testers. We can either tell them, go ahead and test, or we can make them testers by coaching them. You cannot train them, you need to coach them. Okay? So coaching basically means bringing people into it on an informal way, showing them how to test informally, what do they need to test. They're not testers, remember that, but they need to be shown what to do and given that guidance. Coaching requires both experience, so sometimes it's hard for a junior tester to do it. It's also hard because you're talking to people who might be trying to put this on a nice way. They might feel that they're on a higher hierarchical level than that junior tester, so it needs to come from a place of authority. So it is something that a test manager might do, especially if you're working with quite a lot of teams. And remember, as part of that coaching, it's not only about the chat that you're giving, it's about the tools that you're going to be giving, about the processes that you will be having in there. So that coach is in charge of all of those aspects, and you need to have them in place in order to succeed by making non-testers be part of the testing approach. Now, the last tip of advice, the last idea that I have in here, it's something that, again, lately I do believe in it quite a lot, and better and faster and easier. But it was a question that was brought to me by a friend of mine who was actually starting to implement Agile. And he asked me, hey, what happens as I start to decentralize my work? And what happens as part of my job? I need to grow myself out of a job. I need to make sure that my testers are individual and they can work on a decentralized Agile team. What do you need to do there? Meaning I'm basically cutting the floor beneath my feet. And my answer for him is, go ahead. It's useless to fight against a transformation that makes sense. If you are right now the QA director of, and you used to manage directly a team of 150 testers, and all of a sudden they're telling you, well, everyone's going to go into specific teams, and everyone's going to be part of specific teams in there, and you're going to be losing your team, don't fight it. It's the right direction. You need to basically understand that if you do your job correctly, or grow yourself out of the job, and you will end up with a better job than what you started. And I have seen this time and time and time again. People were worried, what am I going to do once I'm not in charge of all these testers? For most people, it's going to be a little bit different, but they ended up having more interesting jobs, jobs that had even more responsibilities, jobs that obviously did not pay less, and jobs that made sense within the organization, and jobs that they felt good about. So basically, you don't need to be in charge of all the quality, and you don't need to be the test lead or test manager. You can continue doing additional stuff, and trying to find yourself from going out of the job is going to be not only useless, but it doesn't feel right. I mean, if going into the centralized teams is the right approach, don't fight it. Make sure that you're helping to do it. Now, what can you do now? Basically, as I said, you should not wait for that perfect idea. You can take one of those that I had here, or one of those that actually popped to mind as we were talking about, and start working on it. Start focused, start strong. And remember, if you're going to fail, fail fast and be happy to move forwards. Not only that, but it's very important to understand where you are as a person, where you are as a professional, where your company is as a whole, to try to understand which ideas make more sense, which ideas will actually have the best option to succeed. Do not try to choose too many. I would personally tell you to start with one. You're very excited, maybe start with two. Do not start with more than 3 points from the list, or from 3 points period, because you need to be focused and you need to be strong. And remember, you're going to be doing the same work that you did up to now. It's not instead of, it's on top of your work. Remember always to work iteratively. And this is what you can see here on the right side of the screen. You need to plan, you need to experiment. Be ready to fail fast, fail quickly. Once you succeed, start over there. You need to refine it and improve it. Okay, so it's an iterative process, and you will need to do it time and time and time again. And remember, once you are revolutionary, then you start to start selling your ideas. There's no such a thing as a quiet revolution. And if you're going to be good at making changes, you need to make sure to sell those victories to everyone and make sure that they understand that it didn't came up by chance. It came up from your ideas and from you revolutionizing this stuff. Now, here's a list of all the ideas that I talked about right now. It might serve you as a lookup. We will share this presentation, obviously, and this recording with everyone else, so you can use it later on. I want to open the floor for questions, and I see one of them here. Is it okay for a test manager to make a revolution in development when we notice that there can be a lot of improvements to ease the work of all? The ideas that I have in here are ideas for testing. Usually, if you're a test manager and your realm, the places where you're going to be working is the testing process, it's going to be easier for you to change something within the testing process. But if you have ideas on stuff that can be done differently in development, by the way, where is it? Pair programming or instrumentation is something that is not related to testing, it's more related to development. And I still believe that we can push for it, even as an idea for the development world. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to push for a big change in development if you're not in charge of development. But if you have an idea on there, go ahead and do it. Again, if you succeed, it doesn't really matter where you do it or where you don't. Okay, guys, I'm not sure that we have quite a lot of time for additional questions right now. So I want to thank you all for being part of this session. Again, if you have any questions, first of all, before we go out, remember, guys, very important for everyone, if you can go to the QA blog, PractiTest.com, state of testing, and talk to your teams and answer the survey and share it with everyone in your teams if you can. That would be great. It will help not only us, but yourselves, because you will be part of the testing survey and we'll be sharing those results. And if you want to contact me at any time, this is how to do it. My personal email address, I'm not going to answer all the emails very quickly, but I promise to answer all of them if needed. I don't tweet quite a lot, but if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's this one here, Joel Monte at Twitter. And if you want to read a little bit more about me, I have my QAblog.practice.com. I try to still write as much as I can. Sometimes it's less, but again, these are the stuff that I like to write about. So thank you very much for everyone on the call. And again, I hope that you have a great year ahead of you. And we'll be back in our next webinar, hopefully next month. So thank you very much and have a great, great, great day. Bye-bye.